Hello everybody, this is Jai Cross. Thank you for joining me in our exploration of sacred topics. Today we will be exploring the topic developing sacred power. It's a good one. You know, these days power has a bad rap. Oftentimes when people think of power, they think of corruption. That is true, oftentimes, of worldly power, which is power over. A suppressive power, a power of domination, a power of aggression. That is a misuse. Our investigation will concentrate not on worldly power, but on sacred power. The word power comes from a Latin root, which means to be able. And this is reflected in the Spanish word poder, to be able. And actually, the noun form of poder is a direct translation of power itself. So this kind of power is an energy and a connection and a dimension of our beings that allows us to do things, allows us to bring things forth, allows us to manifest things, good things, into this world of form. Let's go a little deeper with the grounding practice. I ask you to close your eyes, to let go of any energetic attachments or entanglements that you might be carrying with you. So if your emotional being is still revved up over some incident that happened a while back, let it go. The breath can greatly facilitate this. Concentrate on full exhales, emptying yourself. Anything that's ready to be released. And that's followed by a correspondingly large inhale, bringing the new energy, the new life force, the new supply of oxygen to every cell of your physical form. Emptying and filling. Although these are full breaths, they're not forced. We're not over-efforting. We're welcoming in the new and saying a fond farewell to that which we no longer need. So, sinking in, settling into ourselves, far from the reach of those outer energetic and emotional entanglements. From this inner place of stillness and silence, I ask you to imagine in your mind's eye that you're standing on a beach underneath the full sun. In fact, you're facing the sun. And you see beautiful patterns of light reflected off the water as it gently comes in on the tide. Just like our breath, gently coming in and moves back a little. Then it comes in, then it moves back a little. The constant motion of life. And raise your gaze to look at the sun. In this place, you can stare at it without any discomfort. marveling at its beauty, at its abundance, the life giver. And as you look and appreciate, you feel the heat of those sunbeams coming down to you. From 9 million miles away, they come right to you. And you feel your skin warmed. You luxuriate in it. It's a wonderful feeling. And you feel the warmth penetrating deeper, moving into your muscles, moving into your organs, moving into your bones, moving into the marrow in your bones. You're experiencing more than a physical sensation of warmth. There's a spiritual opening occurring in your body. Feel that and relax into it. Every cell being nourished, receiving just what it needs in this moment. And your whole body relaxing in response. Taking in that energy. Until there's a form of self-illumination. So draw your full attention back to your body. Let go of the image of the sun. Feel how good that is. Opening, relaxing. That sense of fulfillment. A few more deep breaths in this place. And as you're ready, slowly opening the eyes, coming back to an awareness that you're in a particular place right now, at a particular time, the intersection of circumstance. Feels good to connect to something greater than ourselves. The sun is a wonderful object, our being, our presence, our entity to connect with. We tend to open in its presence. Yet there are many things to connect with, many natural forces. You can connect with the air, with the wind, with the beauty of a particular landscape, with a particular body of water, and the movement of that water, or the light shining on that water. So many different ways we can employ our senses to open ourselves to a sense of the sacred and the sacred power that surrounds us. We're essentially wired to do this. Our evolutionary pathway has created these senses, these means of connection, and they're intended to be used. Yet in a modern environment, they're often neglected. And it's very curious when we compare people who live in nature with their senses fully open, connected to the different aspects of nature around them. When we make the comparison between those people and modern people living in industrialized societies. The people living in nature tend to be very happy, tend to have a sense of self-fulfillment, a sense of belonging, a sense of rootedness, energetic rootedness in their particular landscape. It's a landscape they know very well. In fact, the boundaries between themselves and their surroundings are very thin, if they're at all. Their energetic presence extends out to a much greater extent than modern peoples usually do. And we feel that extension at times, oftentimes in natural settings. Say you're at a seashore, for real, and you're looking out at the ocean and the mind goes quiet. Maybe it's being lulled by the action of the waves. If you feel into your energetic body, which we tend to hold about 12 inches away from the physical body, 12 to 18 usually, or less. But if you feel in at a moment like that, on a moment where you are open, well, your energetic body can cover a great expanse. Not only at the ocean, many people experience similar sensation when they're in the mountains. It just naturally opens them up. This is really our heritage. Our body is born with certain expectations of the environment. Some of these are very obvious. We expect that there's going to be nutritious food to support our physicality. We expect that there's going to be shelter to help us live within the elements. We expect that there's going to be some social interaction. Our brains are designed to have that interaction so we can develop language. And if we're deprived of any of those things, we don't develop to our full potential. That's also true if we're deprived of natural environment, which we are programmed to receive. So I spoke a little bit about energetic comparison between primitives, those living in nature, and moderns, those living in modern society. If we look at representatives emotionally, it's very telling, very shocking difference as well. Most tribal peoples tend to be fairly well adjusted, happy individuals. In my travels in South America and Central America, interacting with rural people, with mountain people, with jungle people, I'm very often just almost overcome with how satisfied they are with their lives. People who have very few material possessions. People who would be classified in our country as being in extreme poverty. They don't recognize that because they're connected with so many things around them that they feel full. They have a sense of richness in their lives that escapes many of us, even if we're affluent, even if we have a lot of material things. Modern society tends to be plagued by feelings of separation. Those would include alienation, shame, guilt, and the general sense that something is wrong. And indeed, something is wrong. We have such a focus on the individual and such a de-emphasis on the connections that would support that individual, that would allow that individual to connect with and to express sacred power. It's almost like we're caged animals. Can't find our freedom, can't find our joy. And sometimes we do. There's certainly moments, but for many people, that's not their normal. They're just fleeting moments where things feel that they're as they should be. So the question arises, how do we reestablish those connections? Obviously, it's not very feasible for many of us to move to the jungle, to inhabit a Pacific island, anything like that. Might be possible to spend more time in nature, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. The main problem that I see people having with sacred power, with connecting it, both internally and externally, because we have a huge source within us. The main problem is their self-esteem is out of balance. So there are two extremes there. The one extreme of self-esteem being out of balance would be the individual who is consumed with feelings of self-importance. They feel that they have it right and other people would be okay if they would just listen to their advice more. They tend to be controlling types of people. Overconfident, egotistical, arrogant, demanding. It's very easy for most of us to spot that kind of personality, that kind of out of whack condition. We could go into the psychology of it. I think it probably suffices to say that these individuals aren't really enjoying themselves. Oftentimes we focus on our discomfort without realizing that there's an energetic basis for those behaviors. It seems that in terms of personal power, they're identifying with outer things. They're using their power in a way that it becomes worldly power, power over, power of domination. That's due to the fact that they're not connected with the deeper source of sacred power. Because if they were, they would realize that that's a better choice. So I'm not encouraging you to pity these people, but to have some compassion, because it is a symptom of disease. Believing in the outer structures, in the outer fabrications, in the personality and personality traits more than in the inner being. That's a painful place to hold. So we can have compassion for people who are stuck there. The truth is, most people I encounter in this kind of work, most people that I meet who are engaged with the spiritual path, don't suffer from that imbalance. They tend to be on the other end of the scale. They tend to have low self-esteem. Many people seem drawn to spiritual practice because they are suffering from a poor self-concept. And they hope that they can get past it by chanting or doing Sufi dancing or doing intensive prayer or meditation or some other practice. That it will grant them some respite from those internal voices which try to convince them that they are not worthy. Unfortunately, most of those practices they engage in don't directly address that underlying condition of low self-esteem. They become an add-on. And so perhaps, let's use chanting as an example, perhaps someone feels very elevated, very uplifted when they chant. And this could be either chanting on their own or chanting in group. And so they get hooked on that feeling. It's an ecstatic feeling. They get blissed out. Oh, this is great. I'm connecting with a greater spirit than myself. And indeed, they may well be. Yet, when they come home, when they're not actively chanting, those shadows can reappear very easily, and often do. Shadows which cause them to feel guilty, cause them to feel less than. Oftentimes, comparisons are made with other people. Why aren't I as smart as he is? Why aren't I as good looking as she is? Why aren't I a talented musician like they are? Things of that nature that continually lower the self-estimation. The important point here is that this kind of self-abuse takes us out of personal power, maybe even more than the arrogance, which is a little easier to spot in many cases because it's such an extroverted thing. Whereas the low self-esteem tends to be more introverted. People tend to keep that to themselves. They don't necessarily want others to know how miserable it is inside of their heads when those voices get going. Oftentimes those voices are based on some fairly simple false beliefs that they have about themselves. Very cruel false beliefs. Things such as, I'm not lovable. Now, if you've got that as a core program, you can imagine it can pop up in all different manners. Might turn up, I'm not worthy of having a good mate. Or I don't deserve to have a good job or abundance in my life. I'm not good enough to be a member of that crowd. All kinds of different ways that we essentially shut doors. And even though we might be making an effort to develop that career, to find that good partner, to socialize more with our peers, that background energy pulling us down, creating weight, creating heaviness in our lives, often frustrates our efforts. And even if we get our dream, we get that job, we get that woman, we're in with the in crowd, whatever it is, it's usually not enough to satisfy that voice. It'll still find fault. Or it'll move to a new subject. Yeah, you did that, but you're still too fat. Or, yeah, okay, yeah, that came your way, but look how old you're getting. Things just throwing stuff at us, nonstop, punishing us. So until people come to terms with that voice and with those false beliefs, their connection to sacred power is going to be very limited. Now, it might be that at times they can open up and they can feel that energy coursing through them. They can feel that radiance emitting out from them. But it's going to be sporadic. Those are going to be the in-between times. So if you suffer from this condition, or if you know somebody who does, and we all do, I would encourage you, or if you're working with them, encourage them to try to flesh out some of these false beliefs. What's that voice saying? What's the origin of those words, those thoughts? What are those beliefs? And if you can just write them down on paper, and usually they're very simple, and it might be something like, I'm not worthy, or I don't belong. Once you write it down, really see, do you want to believe that? Do you want that part of your core makeup? Do you want that as your prime directive? Because you have a choice. Nobody programmed that into you. You decided that you would live that way. As if that statement, that cruel statement, whatever it is, as if it were true. And your mind, after you decided to incorporate it, set out to selectively gather evidence to prove that it's true. So let's say the unlovable one, if you were afflicted with that false belief, that lie, that I am unlovable. So you find yourself in a social situation and somebody gives you a compliment on a job that they feel you did well. Tendency is to deflect it. Yeah, okay, thanks. I hear that. But you don't really hear it. You don't really take it in because that runs counter to the beliefs you're holding. And then the next person you talk to gives you a criticism, maybe a very mild criticism. You know, I liked what you were saying, but I thought you went a little overboard on this part of it. Well, that part of your mind can really make some hay out of a comment like that. Can exaggerate its importance, its influence. It might even be a distortion. Might be that person was reacting to something else. Our minds train themselves to look for cues out there to substantiate, to validate the beliefs that we carry. Might not even be a spoken comment. Might be somebody looks over at you and makes a face that seems to be of disapproval. And that inner critic in your mind feels that was directed just at you and can probably come up with some reasons why it was directed at you. And it might be that the person was thinking of something that happened earlier in the day or had a stomachache. Who knows what? It might not even be directed at you. But the mind can make something of that. And every time we do that stuff to ourselves, every time we punish ourselves like that, we diminish our connection to sacred power. We essentially strangle it. That sense of unworthiness translates to, I'm unworthy of sacred power. I'm unworthy of participating in the web of life. You've probably heard that expression, the web of life, how we are connected to everything in our world. We're energetically connected, and so it can also be looked at as a web of power. And the more we go inside in a hurt, kind of self-handicapping way, the more we disconnect from the flow of sacred power, which should always be available to us. So those people living in nature, they don't tend to suffer from this kind of psychosis, this neurosis that many people that I see walking around in the street carry with them. Seems to be a primarily modern condition, at least the prevalence of it. And the fact that that the majority of people in our society are afflicted by something like this. So, the way to move out of that is to address the condition and to take action. As I mentioned, just starting by writing down some of the beliefs, really paying attention. What's that voice saying? And just in doing that, you start to create some distance between yourself and that energetic. Because that voice, that energetic, that presence is something you created, but it's not you. It might be a small part of you, might be an aspect of you, but it's certainly not the totality of you. That's the prime mistake that people with lowest self-esteem make. They identify with those voices, those abasing voices, those voices that hold them down. and they take it to be the truth. Yet if you just take the time to observe, to notice, and to start keeping some records by writing that stuff down, you'll see fairly quickly that that voice is lying to you. That indeed you are lovable. Indeed you are worthy. Indeed you belong. Indeed you deserve abundance and fulfillment. So instead of making it into a war, again, we're looking for a compassionate, gentle approach. Okay, I've got the squirrely voice in here, and it's lying to me. And now that I know it's lying to me, I don't have to suffer under it. I can distance myself from it. And that distance gives you the space of freedom and gives you the opportunity to open to and to fully experience sacred power. The truth is, when we connect with this power to something, let's use that example of the sun. I do a practice most mornings where I go out and I greet the rising sun, and I breathe its energy into my belly, and I exhale my energy through my heart back to the sun to make a continuous loop. I do 3 breaths like that. So opening myself to receive is definitely a big part of it. Because the sun is the life giver. That's the source of life on this planet. So I'm expressing my thankfulness that I've been granted another day in human form, in some really good circumstances. And I open to receive even more. But the second part is equally important. I send my energy back to the sun in reciprocity to make a loop. It's not that my energy is equal to the sun, but I give what I have to give. I want to be a participant in this. I want to share some of myself. And what do I want to share? The best stuff I got. So I'm opening to receive, and then I'm opening to give from my depth. This is the kind of giving that you don't deplete. That's one thing about worldly power. There's usually a small amount of it available, and people tend to compete for that power. Let's say in a company, there's a certain amount, a quantifiable amount of power available. But in nature and in ourselves, it's immeasurable. The more you give, it seems that the more there is there. So if you find yourself giving, let's say you're in a caregiving role and someone needs your support, needs your assistance. A friend has a heart attack, and as they're recovering, you go over to spend some time with them, and you find yourself getting depleted. You find yourself feeling drained. Well, you're working with worldly power, because that gives out fairly quickly. Most people don't have much battery capacity, much storage capacity for worldly power. So they get exhausted. If you tap in deeper, you can give and give and give. Sun keeps shining. I guess someday it's going to burn out, but it just keeps shining and shining and shining. There's no measurable diminishment of its power from day to day, year to year, century to century. We can be like that if we tap in deeply enough. So, this moving out of our self-imposed shadow area, it's like a flower coming into bloom And for many of us, it takes a while to get to that stage. Very important not to look back with regret. Why didn't I do this earlier? Why did I waste all those years? Well, it takes its time. Sometimes the timing doesn't seem to be up to us. There are a lot of other factors in there. But once you start this work, it can gain momentum very quickly. So, if you suffer from that sense of unworthiness, I hope that you will take it on and not just suffer on it, as you probably have for a lot of years already. Well, that's one way to develop sacred power. Just remove those obstacles. Another great way is immersion in nature. Allowing yourself to feel the currents and the influences of a natural landscape. Wherever that is. It could be grassland, it could be a bushy area, it could be a forest, it could be a desert, it could be a lake. There's great power in any of these places that have not been manipulated by humans. The way to receive is to quiet the mind, maybe do an energetic practice so that you're attending to the environment instead of your own thoughts. Because your own thoughts in comparison are very small. So you'll be running your energy through a very small little sieve. And if you can put that sieve to the side and open to the wonder, the beauty, well, then it can all come through. You can bathe in sacred power. Here's an exercise, real short, real simple. You go into a natural setting, and it might be you just have access to a city park, something like that. It might be that there's just one tree. That's what you're going to connect with. That's fine. But go into a natural landscape and come to quietness, to stillness, just like we did at the start of this program. Let go of any energetic attachments. Let go of any emotional turbulence. Let go of any mental chatter. Using the breath is a great way to do this. Just focusing on the breath a little bit till that silence and stillness comes upon you. And then simply listen. Maybe set an alarm for 3 minutes. 3-minute practice. And you start it after you come to the stillness. Listen to the sounds around you. They can be internal sounds. Might be that you hear your own heart beating. Might be you hear the physical movements of your breath. The inrush, the outflow. Might be you hear sounds in your near environment. Maybe there's a squirrel rustling in the leaves. Or maybe there's a breeze that's stirring things up a little bit. Or it might be a sound in the farther environment. It could be a car going by. Maybe a block away you hear this car. But the idea is to not spend time trying to identify the sounds, but just to listen to them without words. And if your attention skips from heartbeat to car to rustle in the leaves, that's fine. As long as you're just attending to the sounds. This exercise is a natural restorative because our senses are open. We're focusing on one of them, but the senses are open and the mind is quiet. Just turning down the volume can help us to open so much. And when those 3 minutes are done, check out where you are. Now, if it was a struggle, if the mind kept intruding, if all these distracting thoughts kept coming through about what you need to do once you go home, or something that happened earlier in the day, or a phone call that you need to make, or you should have said this when you were in that conversation, well, obviously you're not going to get the full benefit of the practice. But if you manage, at least for part of the time, to get there, where there's an inner quietness, just notice how you feel after that. What you'll be feeling is your energetic body being open. And again, it can go both ways. It can be open to receive, if that's your intention. It can be open to radiate, to project. But there are very few barriers to the flow of sacred power. So this is a way you can connect with that web of energy that's around you. The truth is, after you work with sacred power for a while, it becomes increasingly difficult to determine, is that my sacred power, or is that from an outside source? Because it's shared. It's communal power. But it requires that opening. So you want to do things that encourage that. Anytime you connect deeply with a life force or an entity outside of yourself, you're entering into a sacred dimension. You're using sacred power to do that. So the more practice you do, the more easily it'll come to you. I like working with trees a lot, both forested areas where there are lots of trees and individual trees. So another practice is to go out into nature where there are trees and feel around. Not using the rational mind very much, but just feel around. See if you feel drawn to a particular tree and work with that tree. One way I do it is to put my hands on the trunk and I'll breathe in through my right hand. Then there's a pause between in-breath and out-breath. That's in the heart. And then I breathe out through the left hand, and there's a pause. And that's where the energy is in the tree. I'm establishing a circuit, connecting my heart to the inside of the tree. And if you can quiet your mind, and if you can put aside any skepticism, and, that sounds pretty wacko, sounds kind of childish. It is childish, because children don't have all the filters about how they should behave that restrict us as adults. It's childlike rather than childish. So try that out and just see what comes to you. See if that tree shares something with you. And this is probably going to come in the form of an energetic sensation. There might be a mental image. There might be a physical sensation. But oftentimes it's transmitted energetically. Just see what happens. And the more you open, the more will be made available to you. One last suggestion about opening the sacred power is to follow your heart. I've mentioned a number of times how the mind can be a limiting mechanism. The mind is really good at reducing things down, at taking a big experience and coming up with a very simplified version. Maybe just a few words to describe something that oftentimes has great depth to it. So it leaves a lot of stuff out. The heart, as a sensing mechanism, is much more inclusive. And of course, we could talk about right brain, left brain. There are certain pathways in the brain that are available to us that are more inclusive, more artistic, more welcoming, more receptive. But I'm really talking about the thinky-talky brain, that tendency that we have to reduce experiences to words and to concepts. Coming from the heart, opening ourselves, following our heart's promptings, allows us to experience a much greater range than the mind usually allows. I was talking to a friend of mine who's a painter, and I asked him, well, how do you paint? You know? How do you get started? Tell me the steps that lead to a finished canvas. You say, well, oftentimes there'll be an image that I encounter that seems really interesting. It just captures my imagination somehow, and I want to recreate it. Sometimes I'll take a photo of a scene. Sometimes I'll make a pencil sketch of it, so I remember the proportions, some of the details that fascinated me. And then when I get back home, I'll start working with oils. And oftentimes that picture, that image, the initial image, is just a starting point. And something on the canvas begins to emerge. And it works best when I get my mind out of the way. When I let that image that seems to already be in the canvas come out and express itself. And so really it's telling me what to do more than me making conscious decisions about how to do it. Now, obviously, he's had training in this area. He's got his technique down. He's at that place where he can get out of the way and allow a piece of art to come forth. So I would say that he's following his heart there. That it's not verbal commands or suggestions he's responding to. He's allowing a bigger part of his being to be in charge for a while. And these are some of the most enjoyable moments of his life. When he feels that he's connected in that way, that there's this exchange between him and the canvas. Another friend of mine, a professional musician, was just hiking with her earlier today. And I asked her, what are your peak moments? You know, is it, she's a chanter, and so I asked her, is it when you're chanting? Is it when you're dancing? Is it when you're writing a song? When you're performing songs? When you're having sex? Or when, you know, what is it? What would you rate as your highest experiences? And she said, when I'm performing. There's a sense that comes over me that, in a way, I'm not there anymore. The songs just come through me. It's as though the audience is pulling them out of me. That's wow. Yeah. I know that feeling too. I'm not an artist, I'm not a musician, but I work with people one-on-one as a counselor. And sometimes it seems that just what that individual needs to remedy the situation they're in, that comes through me. And it's not that my conscious mind is engaged. It's again that I can step out of the way and allow something to flow through, almost as a gift of spirit. Well, these are times when we're standing in sacred power, when we're surrounded by it. And again, the distinction between what's my sacred power and what's moving through me from another source, it's not very clear. I have a difficult time distinguishing at a time like that. Now, obviously, as it flows through me, it's using my words and it's using some of my experiences. There might be a story that occurs to me to illustrate a point that I'm trying to get across. But it's not one part of my brain telling another part what to do and lining it up in sequence and choosing the words. There's something else that's operating through me. So in following our hearts, we surrender to something that's greater than us, something that we work in collaboration with. And I don't mean to diminish our contribution to that, because it's important. Without us as lenses or prisms or focal points, those truths, those expressions, those beauties would not come through in the unique ways that we do. I had a revelation a couple of years ago. I was in a sacred place with a group of people. I was helping them to connect. And I was in the presence of a very large and powerful and loving energy. And I realized that my contribution was to give a heartbeat to that, because this particular energy didn't have a form. It wasn't embodied. Yet I was open to the energies, and as it came through me, some of my heart added or created a new expression of it. So our contribution is very, very important, even if we're working with really big spirits. Well, more power to you. Hopefully this has been helpful. Hopefully you'll follow up on some of the suggestions I've made, and hopefully you will feel more and more comfortable and at ease in sacred power, whether it comes from you or to you. Pretty much the same thing. Well, I want to shift gears and tell you about some of the things that are coming up on Human Spirit Radio Network. Got a pretty good lineup, and these shows tend to debut on Fridays at 2 o'clock Pacific, although all of them are archived, so you can always listen in at a later date if that's more convenient for you. The first Friday of every month is Waking Gods and Goddesses, Embodying Divine Wisdom and the Sensual Life with host Maria West. And she's always got something good cooking. A lot of times she will interview people. Very, very stimulating shows, so check that out. Second Friday of every month is me, yours truly, Jai Cross, with Exploring Sacred Topics. And next month, the last show in this series is Living as Sacred Dreaming. Let me read you a little write-up on that so you'll know what to expect. We live on multiple planes simultaneously. Many people energetically anchor themselves in consensual reality, which greatly limits their ability to think for themselves, to explore different ways of being, and to activate their visionary potential. Life is most magical and rewarding when we dream big and then manifest those dreams into physical reality. So as always, I'll be going through some energetic techniques on how to do that. Hope you can make it. The third Friday of each month is Sarah McCroskey, Human Spirit Radio's founder. She often has brilliant people to interview, people from many different walks of life, spiritual teachers, practitioners. Check it out. Every time is different. The fourth Friday is the Conscious Evolution of Divine Feminine Archetypes with host Amanda Eloish Johnson. Even though the title includes feminine archetypes, I want to assure you that there's a lot for us guys in there as well. I'm a big fan. In addition to the Friday lineups, on the third Wednesday of each month at 6 p.m. Pacific, Jessica Gabrielle McKay hosts You're Already Psychic, Tools to Strengthen Your Intuition, Follow Your Divine Guidance, and Live a Joy-Filled Life. So I certainly hope you check some of those good offerings out. And again, they're available in the archives. My shows you can access through jycross.com. Hope to see you next month. Goodbye. Many blessings. Stay in your sacred power. It is a good place to inhabit. Thank you.